humanity finally reaches the stars. After centuries of dreaming, inventing, and pushing the limits of what seemed possible, the day arrives when Earth's explorers break past their solar system. The galaxy, vast and unknown, holds secrets beyond imagination. Scientists had debated for decades. If intelligent life was out there, would it be hostile? Would it see humans as insignificant, primitive beings, or worse? Would it see them as a threat? But when first contact finally happened, it wasn't the nightmare scenario Earth had feared. No war fleets, no world-ending proclamations. Instead, humanity found itself staring at something completely unexpected, and it was impossible not to laugh. The moment that changed history began with a simple signal. A weak, static-filled transmission originating from just beyond the Oort cloud, detected by an unmanned deep space relay. At first, Earth's scientists scrambled in excitement. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. An artificial signal, proof of intelligent extraterrestrial life. But as the data was decoded, the initial excitement turned to confusion. It wasn't a distress call, a greeting, or even a warning of some ancient cosmic terror. No, the message was far more bureaucratic. You are in violation of Galactic Expansion Treaty 4, Section 8, Clause 12. Immediate compliance required. Cease unauthorized development or face legal repercussions from the Great Galactic Empire. At first, no one could believe it. Humanity had spent centuries preparing for alien threats, hostile invaders, ancient warlords, robotic exterminators, but not whatever this was. A legal notice? A cosmic cease and desist order? It sounded like something out of a bad joke. That's when the laughter began, and it didn't stop. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, HFY Chronicles-849 is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this community together. Humanity's response was careful, diplomatic. Earth had been through enough wars to know that miscommunication could be dangerous. The United Nations Stellar Initiative, the governing body for humanity's interstellar expansion, drafted a formal reply. We acknowledge receipt of your message. Please identify yourselves and clarify the nature of this treaty. It wasn't long before they received a live transmission, and what humanity saw on their screens was almost too much to believe. The alien figures standing before them were unimpressive, short, barely reaching the shoulders of an average human. Not frail, but lacking the intimidating presence one might expect from an intergalactic empire. Their uniforms were elaborate, covered in polished insignias, giving them the appearance of overly decorated civil servants rather than conquerors. And their ship? It wasn't a battlecruiser bristling with weapons, but something that looked suspiciously like a floating government office, complete with blinking, bureaucratic symbols. The lead representative adjusted the stiff collar of their robe and spoke in a tone dripping with self-importance. We are the appointed enforcers of the most powerful legal authority in this sector. Your species has developed unauthorized warp technology and is expanding into controlled space. The penalty for such violations is substantial. They paused, dramatically, as if expecting humanity to tremble in fear. Instead, they were met with silence, then muffled snickers, then outright, uncontrollable laughter. A human diplomat finally managed to speak between chuckles. Wait. You're serious? You're not here to attack us? You're here to fine us? The alien bristled at the perceived insult. This is no laughing matter. You are in clear violation of established interstellar regulations. Defiance will not be tolerated. But that only made the laughter worse. Humanity had faced plagues, world wars, economic collapses, and self-imposed apocalypses of every kind. They had spent decades preparing for extraterrestrial invasion, existential threats, and cosmic horrors. But not once, had anyone considered that their first interstellar conflict would come in the form of a bureaucratic violation, and it only got funnier from there. The laughter echoed through mission control on Earth, spreading like wildfire through every department tuned in to the first live interstellar negotiation in human history. Scientists, engineers, and even the most Serious military officials were left wiping tears from their eyes. Humanity had prepared for everything, except for being sued by space bureaucrats. But as the initial amusement settled, questions arose. What exactly was the Galactic Expansion Treaty? And who were these so-called enforcers of galactic law? The alien representative, clearly growing frustrated with humanity's reaction, straightened their posture and cleared their throat. We are the appointed officials of the Supreme Galactic Bureau of Expansion and Regulation. We oversee the orderly growth of civilizations within the Great Galactic Empire's jurisdiction. Your species has violated critical clauses regarding technological advancement and territorial expansion without filing the proper requests or paying the necessary fees. Your actions require immediate intervention. The lead human diplomat, a seasoned negotiator who had handled everything from war-ending treaties to intercontinental trade deals, leaned forward with a smirk. Let me get this straight. You're saying we're in trouble because we didn't file the right paperwork? Precisely, the aliens snapped, their four-fingered hands tightening into fists. Unauthorized expansion is a grave offense. Do you have any idea how much chaos your reckless development could cause? Imagine if every primitive species just started expanding without oversight. The bureaucracy alone would be catastrophic. The diplomat, struggling to keep a straight face, pressed on. And what exactly is the penalty for this egregious violation? The alien's expression shifted to something almost smug. You will be required to halt all interstellar travel immediately, submit an official petition for expansion rights, and pay the standard compliance fee of... They tapped on a floating display. 200 trillion galactic credits. The room went dead silent. For a brief moment, humanity considered the possibility that this was, in fact, a joke. But the alien's unwavering expression said otherwise. They were completely serious. Mission Control burst into renewed laughter, louder than before. 200 trillion credits? That was a sum so absurd it defied logic. Not even the combined economic output of Earth's entire history could come close to such a ridiculous demand. And worse, there was no indication of what a credit was actually worth. The diplomat leaned back and crossed their arms. And what happens if we refuse? The alien hesitated, as if they had never actually encountered non-compliance before. Well, you will face the full consequences of defying galactic law, which means we will take legal action. The laughter returned, now reaching the point of actual howling. Legal action? Humanity had braced itself for orbital bombardment, planetary invasions, and apocalyptic superweapons, and instead, they were being threatened with intergalactic lawsuits. It was around this moment that someone in the control room muttered, "We should get our lawyers involved." And that was when everything changed. The lead diplomat turned back to the screen, now with a mischievous glint in their eye. I see. Well, if we're discussing legal matters, we should make sure everything is handled properly. We'll have our legal team review the relevant documentation before proceeding. The alien official blinked. Your legal team? Oh, absolutely, the diplomat said smoothly. Humanity takes legal disputes very seriously. You wouldn't want us to make a decision without fully understanding the complexities of intergalactic law, would you? A ripple of uncertainty passed through the aliens' bureaucratic facade. They had expected fear, surrender, compliance. But this was something else. Then, before they could object, a second human appeared on the communication feed. She was dressed sharply in a dark business suit, her expression unreadable as she adjusted her glasses. "Good evening," she said in a clipped professional tone. "I'm with the International Legal Consortium on Interstellar Affairs. We've reviewed your claims and found several points of contention. If you'd like to proceed, we will require the full legal framework for this treaty, a detailed breakdown of your governing authority, and all precedent cases of enforcement. Furthermore, as per established interspecies legal standards, of which we are now a recognized participant, we reserve the right to counter-litigate on the grounds of predatory legal practices." The alien official's mouth opened, then closed. "Counter-litigate?" they repeated weakly. The lawyer nodded. Yes. Based on your proposed fine, it appears that your governing body may be engaging in unjustified financial penalties against newly discovered species. That could be classified as exploitation. If this proceeds to legal arbitration, we will file for damages. The alien's expression darkened. This was not how things were supposed to go. They were supposed to issue their demand, receive immediate surrender, and move on. This was the way it had always been. No species had ever fought back with lawyers. There was a long, uncomfortable silence. Then, without another word, the alien transmission cut out. The entire control room erupted in cheers. Humanity had just won its first interstellar conflict, in a courtroom. But as the celebrations began, the lead diplomat narrowed their eyes. Something tells me we haven't seen the last of them, and they were right. Because the great galactic empire wasn't finished, and they were about to make things a whole lot more complicated. For a brief moment, it seemed like the galactic bureaucracy had simply retreated into the void, licking its wounds from an unexpected legal counterattack. But humanity wasn't that naive. A species that had mastered interstellar travel knew better than to believe in convenient disappearances. Days passed, then weeks. The entire diplomatic and scientific community remained on high alert, monitoring every possible frequency, running deep space scans and analyzing old transmissions for any hints of what might come next. If the Galactic Empire had any intention of retaliating, they were taking their time. And then, nearly a month after the initial encounter, the second message arrived. This time, the transmission didn't come from a single bureaucratic official. It came from something bigger. The screen in Earth's primary diplomatic headquarters flickered to life, revealing a vast, ornate chamber that looked more like a throne room than a government hall. Rows upon rows of alien figures, some humanoid, others resembling creatures pulled from mythology, sat in grand seats arranged in a semicircle. At the very center, towering over them all, sat a being draped in shimmering robes, adorned with golden chains and intricate markings. "We are the High Council of the Supreme Galactic Empire." The voice resonated through the chamber, its tone dripping with authority. "Your defiance has been noted." The lead human diplomat, now joined by an entire delegation of Earth's most brilliant minds, scientists, politicians, military officials, and of course a formidable team of legal experts, stood tall. They had expected this. "With all due respect," the diplomat began, "we were simply ensuring that due process was followed. If your laws are to be enforced, then fairness must be upheld." Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. It was clear that these beings were not used to being challenged. One of the alien council members, a reptilian figure with piercing yellow eyes, leaned forward. "You do not seem to grasp the gravity of your situation, humans. The matter is not open for debate. The great empire has ruled this galaxy for tens of thousands of cycles. Our laws are absolute. Compliance is not a choice." The lead human lawyer adjusted her glasses. "Interesting position. However, according to the records, your own representative, provided the Galactic Expansion Treaty does not explicitly define penalties for newly contacted species. Furthermore, there is no formal clause indicating that our presence constitutes a violation. You are attempting to enforce a law that lacks legal precedent." The council chamber went eerily silent. The human diplomat pressed on. "You see, while you may be used to enforcing unchecked authority over less developed species, we are not an unorganized civilization scrambling to comply. Humanity has a long history of dealing with empires that mistake control for power." The council leader's expression darkened. "You truly believe yourselves equal to the empire?" "No," the diplomat said, smiling faintly. "We believe ourselves capable of surpassing it." A heavy pause filled the chamber. Then, with slow precision, the High Council leader leaned back, tapping long fingers together. "Very well. Since you insist on technicalities, then you will face judgment not by bureaucratic enforcement, but by tradition." The entire human delegation exchanged glances. "That wasn't in the documentation," the council leader continued. "By the ancient customs of the Galactic Empire, civilizations that refuse to submit through legal means may invoke the right of dominion. You will stand in trial by combat, a contest of superiority. If your species triumphs, Your defiance will be recognized. If you fail. He let the silence complete the sentence for him. Humanity was no stranger to combat. But this was something different. A challenge set not by war, but by ancient rules, likely designed to favor the Empire. The diplomat turned to the military commander standing beside him. The general gave a subtle nod. They both knew the answer. We accept. The council leader smiled, a slow, predatory expression. Then it is decided. In one cycle, your champions will face ours in the arena of supremacy. Choose your best, humans. Your very future depends on it. The transmission cut out, leaving the room in stunned silence. A moment later, someone muttered under their breath, "Well, that escalated quickly." The general exhaled, cracking his knuckles. I hope they know what they just signed up for. Because if the Galactic Empire thought they were about to fight a primitive species with no concept of real warfare, they were about to learn the hardest lesson of all. Humanity didn't lose. And they were about to prove it. The decision was made. The right of dominion would take place in one full galactic cycle, a time frame that, according to humanity's best estimates, translated to roughly 30 standard Earth days. 30 days to prepare for a trial that could determine the fate of an entire species. 30 days to figure out what exactly the Galactic Empire meant by combat and how to turn the odds in their favor. The diplomatic team wasted no time sending back a response. They requested specific details. What kind of contest this would be, the rules of engagement, the scope of the challenge. The answer that came back from the Empire was frustratingly vague. The right is a test of superiority. It is not limited to one discipline, nor bound by a single definition of battle. Your champions must prove humanity's worth by prevailing in the trials set before them. That was it. No other clarification, no categories, no breakdown of what they would be facing. Just a cryptic message implying that humanity needed to prepare for everything. The response sparked immediate debate among Earth's top strategists. Military leaders argued that combat prowess would be the most likely test. The Empire seemed to revere power above all else, so a test of physical strength or warfare would be their go-to. But the scientific community wasn't convinced. If this empire had lasted tens of thousands of cycles, surely brute force wasn't the only measure they valued. Intelligence, technological superiority, adaptability, these had to play a role. And then there was the wild card theory. What if they think superiority means something completely different from what we expect? One of the senior analysts pointed out during a classified briefing. What if the challenge is something absurd, like a test of endurance, or artistry, or who can calculate faster? If they control the battlefield, they control the rules. That was the real issue. The Empire had designed this right to maintain control. The challenge wouldn't just be a battle, it would be a mind game. So, humanity did what it had always done best. They prepared for everything. Within hours of the official confirmation, Earth's military elite mobilized. The best soldiers from every branch, Marines, pilots, special forces, cyber warfare units, were put through the most grueling training regimes imaginable. But this wasn't just about brute force. Military scientists worked around the clock, developing enhancements, exoskeletons, neural implants, adaptive weapon systems. Every possible edge was considered. Meanwhile, the scientific community was working just as hard. AI specialists built predictive models, running countless simulations based on historical patterns of alien civilizations. Engineers refined defensive measures, while linguists analyzed the Empire's phrasing for hidden meanings. The world's best minds collaborated in ways never seen before, pooling centuries of knowledge to prepare for anything. And then, there was the wildcard team, a carefully selected group of individuals from every corner of human society. Athletes, scholars, artists, programmers, survivalists, even gamers. The idea was simple. If the Empire threw an unexpected challenge, humanity would have an answer. 30 days passed in a blur of relentless preparation. And then, the summons came. The arena was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. A colossal structure, floating in deep space, constructed from some form of metallic stone that seemed to shimmer, as if alive. It was vast, easily the size of a small moon, and, lined with towering spires, observation decks, and intricate pathways that suggested layers upon layers of hidden mechanisms. Humanity's delegation arrived aboard a fleet of diplomatic vessels, escorted by heavily armed warships that remained at a respectful yet undeniably visible distance. The Empire had insisted that the right was not a war, that it was a trial of superiority, but humanity wasn't about to take any chances. As the human delegation disembarked, they were greeted by an assembled crowd of alien spectators. Hundreds of species from across the Empire gathered to witness what they clearly believed would be a spectacle. Some watched with curiosity, others with amusement, but most of them exuded a quiet, simmering arrogance. They expected humanity to fail. Then the council leader emerged. He stood at the edge of the grand platform, draped in ceremonial robes, a slight smirk playing across his features. "Humans, you stand at the threshold of judgment. The right of dominion shall now commence. You have brought your champions. Let us see if they are worthy." With a single gesture, the grand gates to the arena creaked open, revealing a vast expanse. Inside, multiple battlegrounds lay in wait, each one unique, each one a mystery. "The rite consists of 3 trials," the council leader announced. "Each will test a different measure of superiority. You may choose your challengers, but know this: once a trial begins, no substitutions can be made." The human delegation exchanged glances. They had prepared for this moment. Now it was time to see if all their planning had been enough. As they stepped forward into the unknown, one thought remained at the forefront of every human mind. The Empire had spent thousands of years ruling unopposed, but they had never faced humans before. The moment the humans stepped into the arena, they knew they were walking into a stage set against them. The atmosphere within was designed to be oppressive. Towering walls of alien metal loomed overhead, pulsing with an eerie luminescence that seemed to shift in color, casting unsettling shadows across the massive battleground. The air itself was thicker here, subtly altered, perhaps to mimic the homeworld conditions of the ruling species. High above, vast observation platforms housed thousands of spectators, alien dignitaries, warlords, scholars, and common citizens of the Galactic Empire, all eager to watch the so-called primitive species prove its worth, or fail trying. But humanity had no intention of failing. At the far end of the arena, the council leader stood on an elevated dais, flanked by a retinue of heavily armored guards. He raised a single hand, and a deep, resonant chime echoed through the chamber, a signal that the first trial was about to begin. "The right of dominion begins with the trial of strength." His voice thundered through the arena. "This is the measure by which all great civilizations are judged. For what is a race that cannot defend itself? What is a species that cannot impose its will?" Across the battlefield, massive gates rumbled open, and from within emerged the Empire's chosen champions. They were monstrous, towering creatures, each standing well over 3 meters tall, their forms encased in heavy biomechanical armor. They moved with unnatural speed for their size, their limbs reinforced with cybernetic enhancements. Their species was unknown to humanity, but one thing was certain: these were bred for war. The human delegation barely reacted. They had expected something like this. One of Earth's champions stepped forward, a man clad in a sleek, jet-black combat exosuit, reinforced with adaptive plating. The armor flexed with his movements, the neural interface seamlessly connecting him to the embedded tactical AI. He rolled his shoulders, testing the suit's responsiveness. The Imperial warriors sneered. "This is your champion?" one of them growled, his voice a guttural rumble. The human only smiled. The chime rang again, signaling the start of the battle. The alien warriors lunged forward, their speed unnatural, their forms a blur of lethal motion. They swung weapons the size of industrial hammers, designed to crush reinforced steel with ease. The arena floor trembled with their charge. The human didn't move. Not yet. He waited, calculated. Then, just as the first of the behemoths reached striking distance, he sidestepped. The alien's weapon came down with thunderous force, striking the ground where the human had stood only a fraction of a second earlier. The impact sent a shockwave rippling outward, but the human had already moved, dancing out of reach with an agility that seemed impossible for his size. Then he struck back. It was a single hit, precise and devastating. A concussive shockwave rippled through the alien's armor as the kinetic pulse built into the human's gauntlet discharged upon impact. The creature staggered, its enhanced physiology dampening some of the force, but not enough. The human pressed the advantage. He ducked, rolled, and wove between the blows of the remaining warriors, each movement calculated to the millisecond. Every counterstrike was deliberate, targeting weak points in their armor, exploiting microfractures with brutal efficiency. The audience had expected a slaughter. They got one, but not the way they had anticipated. Within minutes, the last of the Imperial warriors collapsed to the ground, their massive forms heaving. They weren't dead. Humanity had ensured this trial would be won without unnecessary fatalities. But they had been defeated. Silence rippled through the arena. The council leader's smirk faltered. Humanity had passed the first trial, but the rite was not over. Strength alone does not make a civilization great, the council leader finally declared, regaining his composure. It is intelligence that allows one to rule. And so, the second trial shall commence. The trial of mind. The battleground shifted. Walls folded inward, transforming the arena into a vast labyrinth of glowing pathways and shifting platforms. Massive hollow projectors flared to life, casting intricate symbols and equations into the air, complex patterns that twisted and reconfigured themselves in real time. This trial is one of strategy and intellect, the council leader explained. Your champion must navigate the unraveling maze, a construct designed to test pattern recognition, problem-solving, and adaptability. To fail is to be lost forever. The audience leaned forward, eager to witness humanity's undoing. But the humans, they only laughed. This was a game. A game. The Empire had spent thousands of years crafting what they believed to be the ultimate test of intelligence. But to humanity, it was nothing more than an elaborate puzzle, something that their best minds had spent decades mastering in countless fields. The human champion selected for this trial was not a soldier, not a scientist, not a statesman. He was a gamer, a prodigy whose life had been spent navigating complex, ever-changing virtual landscapes, a mind trained to anticipate patterns, to exploit loopholes, to break systems apart and rebuild them in ways their creators never intended. As the chime rang, he stepped forward, rolling his shoulders. The maze around him shifted, its glowing pathways reforming into impossible geometries. The challenge had begun, and in less than 3 minutes, he solved it. The audience gasped as the final pattern locked into place, the maze dissolving into nothingness. Humanity had won. Again. The council leader's expression darkened. He had expected resistance. He had not expected domination. There was only one trial left. It seems your people are not without merit, he admitted, though his voice was strained. But the final trial remains, the trial of will. A murmur rippled through the gathered aliens. The trial of will was different. Unlike the first two, it was not based on physical strength or mental ability. It was something else entirely. The arena darkened. A deep, resonant hum filled the space. And then, without warning, the humans were subjected to something they had not anticipated. A force pressed upon them, into them. It was not physical, not technological. It was something deeper, something ancient. It was the collective will of the Empire. A psychic pressure that had shattered lesser species. A force designed to break those who were weak, to make them kneel before the sheer presence of the Galactic Order. The human champions staggered. For the first time, they felt the crushing weight of the trial. But then, one of them began to laugh. A single, quiet chuckle. It spread. Soon, the entire human delegation was laughing. The Empire's great, terrible force, the power meant to shatter. Their resolve was nothing compared to the burdens humanity had already endured. What was this compared to generations of war, of hardship, of standing against the void with nothing but sheer defiance? The pressure wavered. The humans stood tall, and at last, the council leader understood. Humanity was different. Humanity could not be broken. The arena was no longer just a battleground. It had become a battlefield of minds, a war of wills. The oppressive, psychic force radiating from the Galactic Council's seat had cracked the resolve of entire civilizations before. Countless species had buckled under the pressure, unable to withstand the sheer weight of the Empire's collective consciousness, pressing into their very souls. It was not just a test of endurance, it was an invasion, a violation, a demand to kneel. But humanity did not kneel. The laughter that had begun as a quiet chuckle had now grown into something more, something unsettling to the Council. The human delegation stood unwavering, their expressions unbothered, their bodies unbroken, their minds untouched. The pressure intensified as the Empire's will surged forward, an unseen tidal wave seeking to drown them. The walls of the arena seemed to tremble under the strain, the air vibrating with an unnatural hum. Spectators watched in silence, the realization beginning to settle into their minds. This trial was supposed to be absolute. This was supposed to be unbeatable, and yet, the humans stood. The council leader's eyes narrowed. He had underestimated them before, but this was impossible. No species had ever lasted this long against the trial of will. Even those who had won had done so by sheer luck, by narrowly scraping past the edge of annihilation. But the humans? They were laughing. The laughter wasn't just amusement, it was mockery. The humans weren't just resisting the psychic force. They were shrugging it off as if it were nothing but an inconvenience. And then, it shifted. At first, it was subtle. So subtle that even the psychically attuned imperial judges didn't notice it. But then the shift became undeniable. The psychic pressure, the force that was supposed to be crushing humanity into submission, was being pushed back. The humans weren't just enduring. They were fighting back, not with weapons, not with technology, with sheer unshakable defiance. The council leader's hands gripped the arms of his throne as his own mind wavered. He could feel the presence of humanity, not just as individuals, but as a force, a collective will as vast and immovable as a planetary core. A will forged in the fires of struggle, a will that had weathered war, extinction, and the vast, uncaring abyss of the cosmos. The Empire had made a mistake. It had assumed that willpower was the domain of the conquerors, that only the ruling elite could impose their might upon the lesser species of the galaxy. But they had never met humans. The human delegation was no longer merely resisting. They were pushing back. The shift rippled outward, slamming into the Council's psychic field like a shockwave. The unseen force recoiled, not because it had lost its power, but because it had finally encountered something stronger. The minds of humanity surged forward, unrelenting. The burden the Empire had sought to place upon them was reversed, and suddenly, it was the Council that felt it. A weight, a presence, a deep, ancient resolve that had existed long before the Empire had ever set foot among the stars. The weight of every battle fought with nothing but grit and determination, the weight of every mother who had sent her child to war, knowing they might never return, the weight of every explorer who had hurled themselves into the black, chasing the unknown with reckless abandon. It was humanity itself, and the Empire had just invited it into their minds. The Council leader's breathing grew ragged as the pressure mounted. He wasn't the only one. Around the chamber, imperial judges and dignitaries shifted uncomfortably. Some clenched their jaws. Others gasped as they felt something they had never experienced before. Something alien to them. Fear. The tide had turned. For the first time in its long and illustrious history, the Empire's most sacred trial, its ultimate test of dominance, was failing against its intended victims. Because the humans weren't bending. The humans weren't breaking. They were winning. The Council leader tried to rally, tried to reassert control over the collapsing psychic field. His mind lashed out, attempting to crush the human resistance with renewed force. But it was too late. The humans had found the weak point in the Empire's test. It had never been their minds at risk. It was the Empire's. Humanity had endured horrors that would have shattered other species. They had suffered under tyrants, fought against impossible odds, stared extinction in the face, and still pressed forward. No empire, no council, no alien force, no matter how ancient or powerful, could compare to the raw, unyielding stubbornness of the human spirit. And now, the Empire was feeling it firsthand. The pressure snapped. A ripple of energy cascaded outward as the psychic field collapsed, shattering like brittle glass. Judges gasped, some collapsing to their knees. The council leader himself swayed, gripping the arms of his throne so tightly his claws dented the metal. Silence fell upon the arena. The human delegation stood firm, untouched, unmoved, and then, without a word, one of them took a single step forward. It was a small movement, but it carried the weight of an entire civilization behind it. The Empire had made a crucial miscalculation. They had assumed humanity's greatest strength lay in its weapons, in its technology, in its ability to wage war. They had never considered that this was its true power, not just intelligence, not just strength, but will, unbreakable, unstoppable. The council leader stared at the humans, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he rose from his seat. His voice, when it came, was quiet, almost reverent. The trial is over. The declaration rippled through the chamber, the words sinking into the stunned silence. The spectators, the dignitaries, even the imperial warriors who had once scoffed at the humans, all watched in disbelief. No one had ever passed all 3 trials like this. No one had ever won like this. The council leader exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment settling upon him. And then, begrudgingly, he did what the laws of the Empire demanded. He bowed. Not deeply, not fully, but enough. Enough to acknowledge what the entire galaxy had just witnessed. Humanity had not just proven itself. It had changed the game. The arena doors rumbled open. The humans turned, walking out with the same quiet confidence they had arrived with. Behind them, the Empire watched in silence, realization dawning across 1,000 minds. This was no longer just a new species entering the galactic stage. This was a power shift. Humanity had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The silence in the chamber lingered long after the humans had left. It was not an ordinary silence, not the quiet of an empty hall or the absence of words. It was a silence born of realization, of disbelief, of something ancient and unspoken shifting within the foundations of the Galactic Empire itself. The council leader remained standing, his gaze fixed on the doors through which the humans had departed. The weight of his own defeat pressed upon him, heavier than he had ever known. No one spoke. No one dared. The trial of will had never been lost before. The idea was unthinkable, the consequences unfathomable. But it had happened. The psychic backlash had been more than just a failure. It had been a revelation. For thousands of years, the Empire had believed itself to be the pinnacle of power, the masters of will, the unchallenged rulers of the stars. Every species they had encountered had been tested, and every species had either crumbled beneath the weight of their might or submitted out of fear. But humanity had done neither. They had not wavered. They had not yielded. They had not even struggled. Instead, they had pushed back, not with weapons, not with threats, with sheer, unyielding defiance. The council leader inhaled slowly, steadying himself as he looked around the chamber. The judges, the advisors, the imperial warriors, all bore the same stunned expressions. Some still trembled, from the collapse of the psychic field, their bodies struggling to comprehend what their minds had just endured. He could feel it, the shift, the realization spreading like a slow-burning fire through the hearts and minds of his people. The Empire had made a mistake. They had not tested the humans had tested them, and they had been found lacking. The thought alone sent a shiver down his spine. Far beyond the arena, across the countless worlds under Imperial control, news of the trial spread like wildfire. At first, it was dismissed as rumor. Impossible. Absurd. The idea that a species so young, so unknown, had passed the 3 trials was beyond belief. But then, the official reports came. The footage, the testimonies, the undeniable truth. Humanity had not only passed the trials, they had conquered them. The implications were staggering. Across the galaxy, reactions varied. Some species, long oppressed under the Empire's rule, whispered of hope. If the humans could stand against the Empire's greatest challenge and emerge unbroken, What else could they do? Could they resist? Could they fight back? Others watched in fear. If humanity was truly this strong, this unyielding, what would it mean if they ever turned their sights outward? And in the highest chambers of the Empire, within the war councils and intelligence networks, the question no one dared to ask hung in the air like a storm cloud. What if we have made an enemy of them? The council leader sat down heavily in his throne, his mind racing. The humans had passed the trials, which meant, by the Empire's own ancient laws, they had earned recognition. They were to be granted full diplomatic status, acknowledged as equals in the eyes of the galaxy. It was a formality that had never truly meant much before. No species had ever passed all 3 trials in such a way. No species had ever walked out of the arena not just victorious, but unchallenged. What did it mean to recognize a species as an equal when they had just proven themselves superior? Meanwhile, aboard the human diplomatic ship, silence filled the conference room. The delegation had returned from the arena without fanfare, without celebration. There was no need. They had known the outcome before the first trial had even begun. They had never been in danger of losing. Commander Ellis stood by the observation window, watching the vast cityscape of the Imperial capital stretch beneath them. "How long do you think it will take?" one of the delegates asked. Ellis didn't need clarification. "Not long," he said. "They'll try to act as if nothing has changed. They'll tell themselves that we're still just another species in the grand order of things." He turned, his expression unreadable, but deep down, they know the truth. He let the words settle. The other delegates exchanged glances. "And what if they decide to challenge us again?" one of them asked. Ellis allowed himself a small smile. "Then they'll learn something else about humanity." He turned back to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "We never lose the same fight twice." Across the galaxy, the balance of power had shifted. For the first time in the history of the Empire, they had been forced to recognize a species not as subjects, not as inferiors, but as something they had never encountered before. Something they had no plan for. Something they could neither break nor intimidate. Equals? No. Not equals. Humanity had just declared in no uncertain terms what they were, and the galaxy would never forget it. The age of the Empire was over. The age of humanity had begun.